for years, I have been working with one kind of person, and it didn't dawn on me the thing that all of these people had in common until after I wrote a book about it. And when I went through and edited the book, I said, holy shit, I see the pattern now. I see the kind of person that I work with. And before it was just, I was too close to see it, even though all of my clients would come to me with very aligned, although expressed differently, issues. And what that looks like is most of my clients are high functioning women in high powerful positions who look like they have it all together, and their relationships are a total mess. More specifically, they look like they have it all together and their mental life is a train wreck. And they're constantly kind of trying to find their place in the world based on production. They find their worth through production, and they find people who don't produce constantly lazy. So they don't identify with that aspect of themselves that is more go with the flow type of thing, although they deeply, deeply want to. I'm going to tell you about this person, and I'm going to do my best to really pull out the threads that differentiate the three common things that go on in this dynamically over this person's life. So if you're somebody who constantly seeks approval from other people, even though you think that you don't, if you are somebody who is judging other people and really has to be good, that makes you feel valuable to produce, to give purpose, you are the person I want to talk to today. So first, the question is, what is the correlation between an empath and a codependent? So I want to pull apart that thread, and then I want to talk to you about codependency and narcissism. And I've written a lot about this, and I want to say again that nobody is the villain here. A codependent actively participates in this dynamic, and I want to help you, if you are this person, to really distinguish what you are from the next person so you can utilize your gifts and actually own yourself to the core, okay? So if you think that you are an empathic person, that's different than being an empath. And I want to talk about this first. So, empathy, according to developmental psychology, happens gradually in stages. So, in emotional empathy, the second that we're born, we are born with a capacity to be emotionally empathetic. Excuse me. And what that looks like is that if you put 3 babies in a room and one of them starts crying, all of them start crying. They can't differentiate that one of them is separate than the other. Then they go through a stage where they recognize that baby is crying, but that's not actually me crying, so I don't have to cry. And then they go through a stage where ideally they go up to a kid and say, hey, here's my toy. I see that you're upset. Would you like to have my toy? This, I believe, is the stage that codependents get stuck in. There is one a level of empathy beyond that, which is, okay, I see that you're crying, and you actually have different toys than I do, so I'm going to go get your toys to give you what you need. Or I'm going to tell you, which would be the more appropriate thing, to go get your toy. Okay? Because that's going to be the thing that soothes you. The empath, I believe, is somebody who is actually stuck in emotional empathy phase. Okay? And this is not bad at all. It's actually a tool. But eventually we get to a point in empathy where we understand cognitive empathy. And what cognitive empathy is, okay, I can see that you are upset, and I can put my mind mentally into why you would be upset, but you don't feel like you are responsible, or like you don't feel the feelings of the other person. So there's emotional empathy, which you physically feel the feelings of the other person. And then there's cognitive empathy, which it's more about like, I can feel that, but I'm going to make that about you, where the empath tends to make it about themselves. And specifically the codependent will inevitably, because they don't have to go hand in hand, but being an empath is definitely a precursor, if you are not raised in the right environment, to be a codependent. So that said, empathy motivates altruistic behavior, which is great. It motivates helping behavior. It gets faulty to a point where we say, I am going to give you help at the extent of sacrificing myself. So there's a differentiation between a highly sensitive person energetically and an empath. And I'm gonna clear that up really quickly, because empathy may also be motivated by the desire to stop somebody else in distress because we can't, on a nervous system level, deal with that other person's stress. So we're like, okay, I'm going to help you because I don't know how to deal with that. Okay? That is more likely a highly sensitive person. A highly sensitive person is actually acting from their own nervous system responses and then giving labels to that response. Whereas the empath literally picks up on other people's emotions and can't even tell that if they're theirs or the other person's. Whereas the highly sensitive person will actually project out and be like, I feel this and this must be true because my nervous system is going crazy. Whereas the empath is like, I'm being bombarded with all of this. And it's almost like the difference between like being super overwhelmed and versus like paralyzed, being overwhelmed, like I have to leave the situation, or I have to fight or flight, or I have to like act out, versus like the empath is more likely to be like, holy fuck, I have no idea what's going on here. So the highly sensitive person is actually feeling other people's emotions, but they're feeling it from their own perspective, where the empath is coming, they're literally feeling it, and they don't even know which perspective to take because they can see it all. They have a hard time distinguishing whose is what. So, and the highly sensitive person might do that also. And to be fair, an empath is inevitably going to act like a highly sensitive person at times in their life, but the empath is actually picking up on other people's stuff, whereas the highly sensitive person is responding basically from their own stuff, triggered by somebody else's stuff. So, empathy in psychological standards can be created by, this is the ironic part, and this is why I'm really passionate about this, because it supposedly comes from either temperament. When you are 5 months old, you are just as likely to be the exact temperament as you are at 5 months at 50, which they say the same thing about empathy. The level of empathy that you have when you're 4 months old is very congruent with the level of empathy that you have when you're much older. So temperament genetics, if you have a soft empathetic parent, you're likely to be an empathetic person. Notice that empathetic is different than an empath, and I'm going to talk to you about that in a second. And then here's the weird aspect of this. Empathy is built with maternal warmth and supportive parenting. The empath, I believe, is built by poor parenting. And so here's the thing. So in empathy, it says psychologically that it's determined by genetics, it's determined by temperament, it's determined by great parenting or piss poor parenting. So I think the piss poor parenting, and not like these people know better. This is not, there are no villains here, okay? The piss poor parenting is the cause of the empath, and I'm going to tell you why. Because the empath, and I have a little tool here. I'm gonna hope that this analogy works out for you guys. So we're all born like this, okay? And this is, just say that this is the empath. In that time where we hear somebody else cry and we can't differentiate if it's us or them, we start crying. So we're picking up on other people's stuff. And the empath is pretty clear, okay? So the empath herself, and I shouldn't say her or himself, a normal empathetic person will inevitably look a little bit more like oil. Like they're kind of a little bit more dense in energy because they haven't had to hone in on staying super clear for the sake of survival. So an empath is actually somebody who goes, okay, I feel that emotion, and they ultimately were a child responsible for empathing the parent. So the normal situation at hand would be the baby cries and the parent responds. For an empath, I believe it's almost the exact opposite. The empathic baby or the empathic child is actually responding to the emotional state of the parent, and they have learned that that's literally what they have to do to survive. So somebody who doesn't have to utilize their empathy constantly, somebody who doesn't have to empathize with their parent, is much more likely to just kind of like become oil. They're much more likely to shut down and go, okay, I don't have to rely on that skill to survive because people are going to actually meet my needs. Whereas the empath struggles to meet her own needs and then ultimately has to hone that skill. So there's parts of the brain that are associated with reducing personal stress that is activated by seeing other people. And the empath, I definitely believe, has decreased activity in the parts of your brain where you differentiate between the self and the other. So ironically, and this is where my work comes in, so empathy is built in congruence with guilt. People who display more empathy along with a deeper sense of guilt are much more likely to follow the rules. And this is also why guilt is such a powerfully destructive and also weirdly useful tool in our society. So if empathy and guilt go together, ultimately what I believe is the codependent empaths the guilt and they feel worthless. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about this in a bit. So if we're empathing the guilt and we're living off of guilt and we're going, I don't have any worth because I literally can't save the parent that I'm empathing and nothing I do is right. There's always intermittent reinforcement. We're like, oh, one day she's warm and the next day she's not warm and I don't really understand. So we're going, it must be me. It must be me. I am the fucked up one here and I am worthless. There's no purpose to my life because I can't even save my parent who I obviously am responsible for saving because, I'm empathing with them and I clearly can tell that they're like either absent, which I want to get to in a second. They're absent emotionally. So I have to like pull them in. And if I can't, then I am not worth anything because that was basically my sole purpose. The other interesting thing, and this is how we know that empathy, cognitive and emotional empathy, are gradual in different stages for people, and they kind of have to match up in order for somebody to be empathetic. Somebody on the spectrum, they have deep emotional empathy, so they can feel it all, but they can't conceptualize what the hell they're feeling, which is not that different than a very highly sensitive person or an empath, except ideally we as not being on the spectrum have enough cognitive tools to override this. So the other end of the spectrum, we have the autistic spectrum, which is I deeply feel emotional empathy, but I can't put words to it. So yours is mine, and it's making me totally freak out. Versus cognitive empathy, which the sociopath or the narcissist is very capable of, and this is why it's very destructive, because they are capable of seeing cognitive empathy and going, oh, that's really getting a rise out of this person. That's really doing something to this person. And they can see that it's distressing, but they can't feel the distress. So it doesn't matter what they do. So their empathy, actually, they have empathy, but it's cognitive, it's in the mind, and they don't really care because they can't feel what's going on for you. And God, to a codependent, we're like, I want to save you. I want to make you come out and love me. And I couldn't save my mommy or my daddy, so I'm going to come and save you because you're void of yourself just like they were. And I know you're intermittently reinforcing me just like they did. And if I can just win this game, I can prove that I'm worth loving, right? So there's something also called egocentric empathy, which is when basically the child... we see that there's a need and we go to that other child and we say, here's my toy. So the empathy is accurate. The gift is wrong. Okay. Because we try to give away our gifts to somebody who's not asking for our gifts. They don't want our toy. They don't want our mom or our hug. They want it from something else that they're not getting it from. And we as codependents go, please, 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 here's this. Like, I'm going to help you. Can you take this from me? And that's not actually what they want. So the empathy is accurate, but it's egocentric because we try to give them what we would want in the same situation. This is where I think codependents are stuck. So empathy itself is another word for clairsentient. And what that means is we can literally clearly feel everybody else's feelings, which is very, very unnerving to the untrained empath. I would know. So the difference between normal empathy, which would be more like oil, and I'm not saying that this is like, there's no comparisons or hierarchy in the situation, although there always is in a codependent and a narcissistic relationship or codependent period. The difference between empathy and an empath is that empathy, you won't have to be trained in. An empath is somebody who is literally requires training to basically determine which stuff is theirs and which stuff is somebody else's. And you can tell if you're a highly sensitive person, basically, versus an empath also, if it sticks. If you leave a situation, so say you're a highly sensitive person, your nervous system is all worked up, you're going to be like the zebra who ran from whatever was chasing it, because a half an hour later, you're going to feel fine. As long as you exit the situation, you're going to feel fine. The empath carries that situation with her. It doesn't matter what psychological tools she uses to overcome it. It doesn't matter how much she can intellectually let go of something or how much she knows better. She's still bringing home somebody else's junk. And the biggest distress in the scenario is that she will, if she is untrained, think it is hers and make a mess of her own life because she is going, oh, well, I feel this way. It must have been because of what happened Thursday. And then she'll go fight with her boyfriend about what happened Thursday when they were already resolved in that situation about what happened Thursday. But really, it wasn't her stuff to begin with. So empaths can be very self-destructive and self-sabotaging because we feel other people's stuff and we don't know that it's actually not ours. Examples of this, I have worked with people. My primary example of this, and it's like kind of embarrassing to admit, I worked with a man who had he was very intense, very, very intense. And he had a lot of dense vibes about his healing process. And there was a lot of resistance there, and that's fine. It is what it is. But that night, I come home. My boyfriend he always calls me when he's on break from, he's a musician, so he'll go out and do a show and then call me on a break. He didn't call me. And then I couldn't get a hold of him. And I was up until 1:30 in the morning, bugging out. I mean, like I was pacing. I was doing things that were just not me. Just like I am not the person who's going to pace around. Like I'm going to go to bed because I don't give a shit what you're doing. If I'm pacing, I should have known better. It took me 4 hours for some voice in my head to go, this is not yours. This is not yours. This is not yours. And literally, and I want to give you the tools to help you distinguish this too, because the second that I heard in my head, this is not yours, I said it 3 times. And I felt this energetic lift. And I was like, holy shit, that's all I had to do earlier. And then I could essentially like cut away in my auric field the parts that like if I really settled into my body, like where is this housed? What does this look like? And ultimately I can mentally visualize like I'm just slicing this away and I'm returning it to where it came from. Because as an empath, it doesn't serve us actually to work out other people's stuff for them. It serves us to feel it so we can help them get to the other side of it, but it doesn't serve us to actually save them. So what we have to understand really in empaths and empathy in general is that feelings are energy, and feelings can be thrown. Feelings can be, the woman who's like, and you feel her fly across the room even though she's standing at the doorway. You know that you can feel that energy being thrown at you. Energy is real. And if we look at it from a psychological, as a psychotherapist, I'm going to tell you today, there will not be a way out through a psychological modality. Doesn't matter how long you are in therapy. There will not be a way out of your empathy until you address it on an energetic level. And it's not like you have to get out of your empathy, but there won't be ways out of your own web until you address what you need to address at the energetic level. So we need to get that that's real. Like, we're not making this up. I'm not crazy. You're not crazy for feeling what you're feeling. It's legitimate stuff. It's actually happening, okay? So, it's also, I suppose, fair to say from the research that I've done that the empath is wired in energy and psychology, whereas the highly sensitive person is wired biologically and psychologically. So they're coming from, my biology is affected by this, whereas an empath, so it's like an inward out, my biology is affected and I have to like do something to make that stop. Whereas an empath is energetically wired. So somebody else can literally input to the empath and that affects their biology. It's not an inward out process. It's an outward in process. Does that make sense? Okay. So the seed for codependency, no matter how you look at it, is in empathy. Empathy doesn't have to mean that you're an empath, but the seed for codependency is absolutely in empathy. So codependency, which is also considered, which is all of the people that I work with who don't even know they're codependent. I didn't even know I was codependent, and I had a master's degree in psychology, and I was a spiritual junkie for years on this path of self-discovery, and realizing that not only am I an empath, I am a codependent empath. It was like learning that I had cancer my whole life, and all of a sudden I was cured. It was like, okay, now I know I have a platform to work with. So codependency is also classified as self-love deficiency disorder by some people, which is ironic because I want to explain to you in energetic terms the way that I see this going on. So it's actually the addiction to chasing your own worth, your own purpose, because we feel so purposeless as codependents that we essentially have to seek to save somebody else to make sure that our life has value. So codependency is the addiction to basically being numb to the sense of loneliness that we feel. So we will do anything to eradicate that sense of loneliness that was created by what we could call an attachment wound in childhood. Normally, in psychological terms, from a narcissistic parent, but again, I want to just labels are cool for the sake of using them constructively, not destructively. This isn't to vilify anyone again. So the empath is the healer, the codependent is the fixer, okay? And I can be a codependent requires a co, okay? So I have to be in a codependent relationship. I have to be with another person to be a codependent, but I don't have to be with another person to be an empath. And I want to talk about the irony of being an empath raised by a codependent. I want to talk about the irony of being an empath enmeshed with a codependent and what that looks like. So a codependent's entire character is based on basically an image. So we're going, I'm worthless, I'm going to project outward that I can save you, I can help you, and that's going to be my worth. And our self-worth and self-esteem is validated by what we do and validated by other people's opinions and I suppose thoughts about us. The problem with being the empath is that often also those opinions and thoughts deeply create us. They're not just affecting us. If we don't hang out with the right people as empaths, we are literally being created by somebody else. And this is why I think this work is so important for empaths, because here's why. I want to just explain this to you. Let me see. I do have... Oh, here's the common thing too. So both a codependent and an empath will struggle to create boundaries and to know what their own needs are. So if we look at it in terms of this, so say I'm an empath. I don't have enough cups here. I am an empath, okay? So let's just put water in here. Here's the codependent. And the codependent normally gets in relation, I'm just going to use this, I hope it works, normally gets in relation with a narcissist because they, what we ultimately do is we go, I have to save you, and the narcissist, hold on, I'm going to drink my coffee and use this cup. You can tell also, because a lot of codependents go, am I a narcissist? The codependent desires to be in relationships with people. They deeply, and when I say in, I mean literally in. Like they want to get in a relationship with people. They want that to be their safe space, and that's it. They feel secure in a relationship. The narcissist kind of uses relationships like we use a cup. They use it. They don't really think about it. It's something that they manage. It's not something that they desire to be in, and I'm going to hopefully demonstrate why. So if we have a narcissist who's basically the empty cup, who wants to use things because that's the only way they know, one thing we also have to realize is that the narcissist started out as a codependent who didn't have a co, Okay? So they started out as a codependent trying to get their needs met by a parent or somebody in their immediate life as a child who didn't co-create with them. So there's actually a benefit to being a codependent who actually has somebody to co-create with. But we have to recognize that we're in the dance. So the codependent sees this void and goes, oh my God, I know exactly what you did. You escaped yourself. So the codependent goes, I'm going to help you to feel alive by giving you all of my sustenance, basically. And God, the narcissist loves this because they don't fucking have any of their own. My job in my work is to get people to put their stuff back, their sustenance back in their cup and work from that place. So if you look at this cup as like the outside is just an image, the outside of this is just an image, the sustenance inside is what's important. The codependent essentially becomes void of themselves, and then the narcissist hates them because they're trying to infiltrate something that isn't actually them in the first place, so they will always see them as incongruent, inauthentic, and weak somehow. That said, the codependent does what they do because they understand that the narcissist is void of themselves because it represents a parent that they had that they never were able to save themselves. So they seek to pour all of their stuff into the narcissist, and ultimately the narcissist, and this is why shadow work and inner child work are so important for the codependent empath, because the narcissist is literally living in their own shadows, and the codependent inevitably will give all of her sustenance to her shadow self. She will become void of herself for the sake of somebody else. So shadow work is important, and I can tell you more about that later, but also inner child work, because there are attachment issues going on here that have halted the development of both of these people. So the narcissist, I already said this, okay, the narcissist started out as a codependent, and the codependent and the narcissist are the flip side of the same coin. One seeks to be good, one seeks to give to prove their worth, and the other seeks to take to prove their worth. If you give this to me, then that means I'm worthy. And the codependent goes, if I give this to you, that means I'm worthy. So I hope that I'm unthreading these things for you so you can understand the relationship between an empath, a codependent, and a narcissist. For the codependent, whether you're a codependent empath or whether you're just a codependent period, the most essential things to get you back into this cup are discovering actually what your likes are, actually what your preferences are, and that might require some isolation, because an empath typically goes through phases of, 3 phases of development in their empathy, which would be I live for everyone, or I live for others to begin with, and then I live for myself. And that's the period of like kind of isolation where we're going, what do I actually like? What actually does feel good for me? Which is going to drive everybody else crazy. All of a sudden we're going to be selfish and assholes for like literally just settling into our own energy body and feeling out what our preferences are. And then once we know that, we can again live for everybody else. But it's not for others. I'm included in the equation of living for everybody else then. So to discover what your likes and dislikes are absolutely essential, which might require some isolation, which is going to shove you into that place of loneliness that you didn't want to be in the first place. But it's okay, because you're the only person who can save you in this space. So also I want to say, say I am I am an empath, and I am raised by a codependent. What do you think that does to the empath? So if I'm an empath and my codependent person has dumped all of her sustenance into somebody else, ultimately I'm going, I can help you, I can help you, I can help you. And we go to the person, we ultimately realize like this person can't meet my needs. So ultimately, if both of our needs are going to be met, I have to meet their needs. And that is a vicious, vicious cycle, because that is when the empath goes, am I a narcissist or am I a codependent? I don't understand what I am, because I can see it all. And I can see where she is, I can see where he is, I can feel that like, no, they're all zombies basically. I don't understand what I am in this whole mix. So it's very likely a possibility, if you question this in yourself, that you are actually an empath, which supposedly only 1% of the people are. And the more I understand this, the more I'm like, dude, we need to rock this shit like crazy. Who was raised actually maybe not even by a narcissist, but by a codependent. And in them not being able to meet our needs because they were void of themselves, which is no different than the narcissist, we basically infiltrated their space, which inevitably probably looks a little bit more like this, because it's like oil and water. And then we go, well, I thought we were supposed to blend. I thought we were supposed to like get along in this situation. And the codependent's like, no, fuck you. I'm out there. Why are you trying to pull me back into my little space, right? Why are you trying to put me back in my little container? Embodiment is absolutely key for the narcissist, the codependent, and the empath. Putting all of that sustenance back into the vessel in which it came is absolutely key. And we have to get into the vessel to decide what the vessel wants, what we want, and how the vessel wants to create. Okay? So, it's really important to also distinguish what's yours and what was told to you that you believe. Like, your worth is not ever going to be met by producing, because you're always going to have to produce and produce and produce, and that's going to be exhausting and tiring. So your worth actually is established by the way that you live your life, based on the ability to create boundaries that you say yes to more than you say no. How many of us, and this is all of my clients, do things out of guilt, which is like, oh, that's how empathy is created. Let's guilt our children. But guilt is the thing to be eradicated from the empath, because the empath thinks that she is absolutely worthless without serving somebody else. Not true. The codependent thinks that. But the empath, who's born into the pattern of codependency, will inevitably think that she is worthless and she has to produce and blah, blah, blah. She has to give in order to receive. She has to constantly be meeting other people's needs. And that's an image disorder. It's literally, I do not exist without your validation. And that's no different than the narcissist. I do not exist without your validation. So we play this game together. And it's a dangerous game. So again, I'm Stacy Hoch. I suppose I am here to help codependent empaths get in their vessel and create from their own sustenance instead of other people's. If you would like to learn more about this, definitely sign up for my newsletter. I am intending on doing a mastermind and a beta course online for specific to codependent empaths, to pull apart what's yours, what's not, your worth blueprint as a child. So definitely sign up for my newsletter and keep an eye on that if any of this made sense to you. And I hope that is of service to you today. Maybe the first step that you can do today is decide like what, I think a lot of empaths, especially based on guilt or codependence, period, we get to a state where we start to experience pleasure or start to experience ease, and then we feel guilty about it. We're like, oh my God, I'm not allowed to do this. So push past that threshold of deserving. Push past that threshold just today of like, I'm going to do this shamelessly, not even feel guilt about it. Whether it's like pleasuring yourself, whether it is giving, getting a massage, whether it's giving to somebody because you genuinely want to, not because you feel guilty about it, but doing something that you genuinely find pleasurable, detaching from the guilt associated with it. Maybe just start there today, okay? So I hope this was of service to you. I know it's very long. I've never made a video this long, but thank you so much for being here, and I love you. And you're so worth it. You're so worthy. You're so in there. The job is to get in here so we can create out there. Okay? Bye.